Welcome to our video on the really big argument that was happening during the ratification of our Constitution, and the argument that probably has one of the biggest impacts on your individual rights today, right? So a country divided, we're looking at the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. What we're going to be talking about here was happening all around the ratification of our Constitution, right, which was in the 1787-1788 range. So I'm going to set the setting here for you. It's 1788, and our brand new government coming off of the Revolutionary War is going around to each of the individual states because it's necessary that they sign the Constitution in order for it to be ratified, in order for it to be law. So they get to two different states, Virginia and New York, where there is a large number of a group of people called Anti-Federalists who are not ready to sign the Constitution. And they put up a big fight or a big argument that kind of delays the process of ratifying our Constitution. So we come up with this argument of Federalists versus Anti-Federalists, which is where your understanding needs to be. So let's kind of lay the base here of defining what is a Federalist, okay? So a definition of someone who would identify at the time as a Federalist is someone who supports a system of government in which several states unite under one authority, and in this instance, our federal government, right? So we see everybody coming together and uniting under this one central government. And at the time, the main advocates for this Federalist group were Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. And these actually were the three men who wrote the Federalist Papers. These were published in a New York newspaper at the time, and this picture over here kind of shows you the cover of that collection of essays that kind of advocated for this is why we need that strong federal government. This group also included more big names like Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, along with these other gentlemen here. So what was their stance, or what were they kind of standing on? Well, they were, according to this definition, all about that one central government, right? So they believed in one strong central government. They believed that the three branches of government and the checks and balances that we have were sufficient safeguards against tyranny, right? Like, we're coming off of this Revolutionary War against Britain that we saw as this big, ugly, tyrannical government, and we didn't want that again. So the Federalists said, well, the checks and balances with the three branches is perfect. They were rather elitist, meaning they were mostly made up of wealthy, upper-class property owners, and their biggest fear was the unchecked masses, right? The big group of people that did not include upperclassmen, and they feared not checking that large group of people. So they very much favored our Constitution. That's a big thing that I would have down. They very much favored our Constitution and wanted it ratified quickly. So then, who was this Anti-Federalist group that put up a good fight in Virginia and New York? So if you know the definition of a Federalist, which we just went over, an Anti-Federalist then would be the movement against one strong government, okay? So they are against the one strong government. And this group of gentlemen included people like Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, George Mason. Okay, so they did not favor the Constitution, right? That's a picture of the Constitution up here. They actually favored the Articles of Confederation instead. And if you remember in our understanding of Articles of Confederation, those made for a weak central government. Therefore, the Anti-Federalists, who wanted a weak central government, was in favor of those Articles of Confederation. So what was their stance? Well, they believed in strong state governments and therefore wanted a weaker central government. Their ultimate fear was that tyranny that we faced when we were facing Britain, that big, ugly, tyrannical government, right? They didn't want to repeat that again. They thought if we have this central power of government, they would increase taxes, they would obliterate the states, wield dictatorial powers, right? We thought we're just going to create another tyranny, another dictatorship. So they just wanted to avoid that altogether by putting their faith in the state governments. They viewed the Bill of Rights as absolutely essential to protect individual rights. They said, no, checks and balances and the three branches of government are not good enough. We need something more. So they advocated for these Bill of Rights. And like I've said previously, they finally feared the concentration of power. They believed more in the common person, not that elitist, upper-class, wealthy property owners that the Federalists were. So what ended up happening, right? What was the final result of our argument between Federalists and Anti-Federalists? Well, the ultimate compromise was that Bill of Rights. The only way that they were going to ratify and say, okay, let's move forward as a nation is if we had the Bill of Rights, which is our first 10 amendments, right? And so that was the compromise that eventually wound up in the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that you see today.